Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Journey Podcast, episode number 43, the Joe Dziedzic Hockey Journey, presented to you by OnlineHockeyTraining.com. I'm your host, Coach Lance Pitlick. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you won't miss out on any future episodes. Before we open up the trunk and start unpacking the conversation, if you want to learn more about me, my hockey experiences, what I know, and most importantly, how I've been helping hockey players get really good with a stick and puck, just head on over to OnlineHockeyTraining.com and gain instant access to my 10-part video series where I'll show you everything. Consider it my gift to you. My next guest is Joe Dziedzic, and I'm super excited to hear his hockey journey. Joe grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he spent his childhood playing football, hockey, and baseball. By the time he finished his high school career, he had college scholarship offers for all three sports. In 1990, his senior year at Edison High School, he won Mr. Hockey, which is awarded to Minnesota's best male high school hockey player. And later that same year, he was drafted in the third round, 61st overall, by the Pittsburgh Penguins. After high school, he began his college career with the hometown team, the Minnesota Gophers. Following 4 years of schooling and hockey growth, he would sign with the Penguins and go on to play in 130 NHL games with Pittsburgh and, at the time, the Phoenix Coyotes. But it was a career cut short because of an eye injury. After his retirement, he got into coaching at the team level and also doing small group skill development training through JD Hockey. He's currently the head coach at Minneapolis High School and was the 2022 Minnesota High School Coach of the Year. So we have a lot to talk about. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Joe Dziedzic to the show. Joe, welcome to the Hockey Journey Podcast.
Well, thanks a lot, Lance. Appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad to help you out and be on the show.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on winning the 2022 Minnesota High School Coach of the Year award. Obviously, you didn't get the memo to silence your phone. No. Well, congratulations on that. I want to talk about that later on, but as I start all interviews with former players let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Your buddies like? What were you doing back then? And, just give us a peek of what it was like growing up, Joe Dziedzic.
Well, it was always interesting and always something going on. It seemed like growing up northeast Minneapolis, I come from a big family. I was the youngest of six, so I've got two older brothers and three older sisters. And our backyard is probably about 30 feet by 60 feet. So it was a tiny backyard. And it seemed like we always had, friends or brothers or sisters, friends over at our house. And there was always activities going on. So it was always, when you got up to when you went to bed, it seemed like there was a game or a basketball pickup game, or maybe there's a wiffle ball tournament going on. It seemed like constantly doing something involved in sports. And that's what I remember about growing up in Northeast. Had a good group of buddies that were involved in sports, and we seemed like we did all the sports together. We went from football to hockey to baseball, and then the summer we kind of did all sorts of combinations of maybe basketball, wrestling, tennis camps, everything. And it just seemed like that's just what I knew because everybody I was around was doing that.
Were your brothers and sisters big time into sports as well, or was this more with neighbor friends?
No, they were good athletes. Both my brothers went on to play college athletics. My older brother Tim was a football player at Mankato State. Older brother Steve played basketball at the University of St. Thomas. So it wasn't that hockey was that big of a deal at our house. It just seemed like it was sports in general. So sisters were playing volleyball and basketball, and it just seemed my dad was a former professional baseball player. He actually played catch with Jackie Robinson way back when. He was part of the Brooklyn Dodgers farm team and then got drafted in the Korean War. So that was the end of his baseball career. But So athletics is a big part of our family in Northeast Minneapolis.
So when you said that hockey wasn't kind of moving its way up to the top of the mountain in comparison to the other sports, uh, when did that happen?
That's a good question. I think, if anything, it was probably football was the biggest one that my brothers were into. My older brother Tim did play hockey and was a good hockey player, but football was his main love. And I think, I was a pretty good football player too. And I was kind of going back and forth if I was going to maybe play football in college or if I was going to play hockey. And there was even some talk of baseball. And I guess hockey really didn't come into the limelight until maybe my second year of Bantams. Our team went to the state tournament and had a pretty good season that year and scored a lot of goals and started to get attention from some colleges. But I guess I really didn't have a plan to play hockey. It just kind of happened.
Isn't that interesting? So you get to high school, and when did you start playing varsity at there? Because for everyone out there, if you don't know, back then Edison, I mean that was one of several Minneapolis schools, and now they're all combined. But back then, were you playing high school in seventh grade or?
No, I was no. So in fact, Edison youth hockey back when I was growing up, each high school in the city, I think there were 6 or 7 high schools in Minneapolis, all had their own high school team, high school hockey team, and their own youth program. So Edison youth hockey was where I grew up, and all my buddies played for. And my second year of Pee Wees, we lost to Wayzata to go to the state tournament for Pee Wee A, and that was like kind of like a big moment for us. And of course, I moved on to Bantams, and it wasn't until my second year of Bantams where we beat Roseville to go to the state tournament. And so it was the first time my Edison youth program had gone to the state tournament. And, so yeah, it was exciting for us back then. And now I'm coaching the high school team, 30 some years later, and we're down to one high school. Well, it's still 7 high schools, but there's only one high school hockey team. They're all combined to form one team.
Yeah. And you guys made it to the big dance for the first time at the high school level, wasn't it?
Well, the first time in 30 some years. Actually, Edison High School went to 1994 after I had graduated. But that was, I think, one of the first years of the two class system. They went from just A to A and double A.
Interesting. Yeah, it's the dynamics of sports has changed. You look at your childhood and growing up and playing 3 sports, like organized sports, and then in the summer just recreational stuff like tennis and basketball with your buddies. But can a multi-sport athlete exist today if they if they have aspirations of playing college?
It's a good question. I think it's something that you could really dive into and probably do a whole show just talking about that issue, that topic, because it seems like more and more kids are focusing on one sport and they're doing that sport almost year round. I worry sometimes because I'm in the hockey training business, whether it's training guys, whether it's running camps or different leagues, and I see some guys that never take a break and they're playing 12 months a year. And I don't know if it's necessarily to their benefit. I think sometimes it's good to take a break to do something else. I remember when I was playing, I get done with hockey and I was looking forward to the baseball season coming up. And I was kind of bummed out that the high school season was over in hockey, but then I knew I was looking forward to going to batting practices and start, getting ready to go on the ball field and play baseball. So I see today when the season's over, kids all of a sudden, they go right from, if they're in youth hockey, the season's over and they go right to AAA hockey. And if they're in high school, it seems like they've got some type of hockey training as soon as the season's over. And I wonder if they're, taking the time away to just unwind and recover and maybe do some strength training or just do things that aren't in the rink. So mentally you take a break.
Yeah, that could be another show.
It could be.
Big time. So did you have college scholarships for all three sports, football, baseball, and hockey in high school?
Yeah, and in fact, I had a lot of people telling me that I was a better football player than hockey player, and so I was getting letters and phone calls from big time programs, Michigan State, the Gophers, UCLA, USC, Texas, Oklahoma, all these different schools. And I don't know. I just hockey. I think what it came down to, Peter, was that I loved hockey practice a lot more than I loved football practice. Friday nights were great for football, but the practices were were a real grind and just it was tough. But I just think hockey was funner in the practices and the games, and then I was like, I think I like hockey better. I think I'd rather be a bigger hockey player than a average or regular sized football player.
Well, I'm sure that if there was a question that you were getting advice from your family, your parents, to before you make a decision, wait till after the hockey season, and you end up winning Mr. Hockey your senior year. If anyone wants to take the time, if I remember, I'll put it in the link in the description. But your picture winning that award, you'll never see a nicer mullet than you see right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that was a fresh mullet. I mean, and it was funny because it seemed like that's just what everybody did back then, and I didn't think, I wasn't anybody cool or anything. It was just what me and all my buddies did, and it seemed like that was the thing to do at the time. Looking back on it, it's kind of funny, but
It's awesome. So, how special was that recognition because of where you came from? I mean, you weren't from one of the big powerhouse schools like Edina, Minnetonka, or Wayzata. How special was that for you?
well, it was really special, and especially the year. I mean, in the fall, I was named the Metro Football Player of the Year, and to be honest, I had kind of a maybe a letdown with my senior year as I separated my shoulder and I missed, I don't know, 2 3 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of games. And I just seen when I came back, I was kind of tentative and I wasn't really playing my best. I didn't feel. And then I started to get hot and started to do well, only to have our season end the first playoff game. We got upset by a team from Wilmer. And it was a team that we had beat like 5-0 earlier in the year. And I wasn't even playing because I was out with my shoulder injury. And I think it was a classic case of looking past the team to the next game. And that team snuck up and beat us 3-2.
Isn't it funny how you always remember uh, a game or two like that in a career?
It still stings. It's 30 years later.
Yeah, but then you did the same thing to other people.
Yes.
Years later as a coach that we're going to get into. Um, Also, your senior year, and I'm sure this helped. You were drafted in the third round, 61st overall to Pittsburgh. Uh, doesn't have the social media as does today, but was that anything on your radar? Because when I was drafted, no, I wasn't the third round. I was in the ninth round. Were you at the draft? Did you were you paying attention to it?
It's funny you bring that up. So I kind of had a feeling I was going to get drafted, and I knew Pittsburgh was, they had some interviews with me and some phone calls, but so did a couple other teams. And I guess I really wasn't that dialed into it, to be honest. I was in the middle of the summer. It was June, and I remember playing baseball. And I got home from a baseball tournament, and the phone rings. Landline phones back then, and my mom gives me the phone, and it was the Pittsburgh Penguins scout saying, I just got drafted, and I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm going back to play another baseball game. See you later. So it was kind of looking back at it. I should have been more of a big deal, but I guess I was just used to doing that season sports and just kept going.
Yeah, you were engaged in the process of just being a kid and doing what you love. So that you end up, Metro Football Player of the Year, Mr. Hockey. You end up going to the University of Minnesota to play college hockey. before you get into talking about that, I mean, if you're getting recruited by hockey, football, and baseball, uh, what were those months like for you and your parents to have to deal with all of those conversations?
Well, it was starting to get stressful because it seemed like every night there was a coach or two calling and hyping up their school and why I should go to their school and let's set up a visit and do all these things. At the same time, I wanted to hang out with my buddies and just be a high school kid, but I knew there was going to be a time I had to cross the bridge and pick a school and pick a sport. And so I finally picked Minnesota, and it was a big relief to become a Gopher and look forward to becoming somebody that I used to go to as a kid. I used to go to Williams Arena, and watch, uh, you know, guys like Tom Chorsky and Tom Hirsch, and guys like you and Corey Millen, and all these guys. Snuggerud. I just remember names. Gary Shopek was a. I got a fun. Do you remember Gary Shopek? So you didn't play with him though, right? He's older. Oh, he did. So I was at a game, and I was probably in junior high, and I was in like the fourth row at the old barn, and Gary Shopek had just stepped up and crushed a guy from Wisconsin, and Gary's stick went over the boards and landed like a row in front of me, and the guy in front of me caught the stick, and I was like, "Wow, what a hit!" And there was a whistle, and then the usher had come down to grab the stick from the guy, and Gary saw what was going on, and got a new stick, and he came over and he tapped on the glass, and he told the usher to give it back to the guy, and I thought Gary Shopek was the coolest guy ever. And I got to meet him later on, so I got to know him, and the Junkyard Dog. I think that was one of his nicknames, but that's one of the memories I have of watching Gopher hockey.
Yeah, he was one that left this place way too early. That was a tough deal with him. But well, let's talk about your years at Minnesota. Did you win any league championships, trips to the Final Four?
Yeah, we won. Let's see, my sophomore year, we won the WCHA. We had a really good team. I mean, it was a team that was loaded with future NHL guys. Trent Klatt, Doug Smola, Chris McAlpine, Craig Johnson. Who else was on? Jeff Nielsen. There was a lot of really good players. We had Travis Richards. We had Tom Newman. And we had Jeff Stolp in goal. I'm missing some other guys too, but we had a really good team. Larry Olam was in that group. Scotty Bell, Darby Hendrickson. We had a really good team, and we lost to Lake Superior State that year to get to the Final Four. And then in my senior year, we went to the Final Four, but unfortunately, I had a busted arm and was watching from the stands at the Civic Center.
How was school for you? Being a student athlete there, did you finish up your degree? And if you did, what was it in?
I got a communications degree, and I'm trying to remember who was the guy that was the academic advisor. Do you remember? What was his name? Oh, it's well, you would know it if I brought it up. And I just told him, I said, I'm not a math guy, so anything that doesn't have a lot of math, that's what I want to major in. And ended up being communications. And so what I thought I was going to do was move on to do some type of sportscasting, or maybe a play-by-play guy, or maybe I'll do this like a news anchor type guy. That was kind of what I was going to school for. Never did use that. But I did graduate. I was a couple of credits short when I left after my 4 years, and then one of the summers I just went back and had to do a couple of credits, and that was it. So I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I had a full year left, but I had a similar story with the counselor. Wasn't a very good student. Had to take the entrance exam twice, 2 or 3 times just to get in, and I just barely got in. But
you got in.
I went in there and said, what do you think is the easiest degree to stay eligible with? Uh, and he put me in the right one. I got a
Nice.
human relationships degree, but I did finish. And when I had kids, it was important. You start something, you finish it. Um, but that was back then. I don't know what I'd say now. Let's transition now. You were drafted by Pittsburgh. You end up turning pro after 4 years at the University of Minnesota. And you had a solid year playing for the Cleveland Lumberjacks in the IHL, what it was called back then. What for you was the biggest difference making the jump from college to pro? Was there much of an adjustment, or was it a pretty easy transition?
I would say I felt like, I had some injury problems at the U. Like I busted my arm twice my senior year. I had to put a plate in my arm, and so I missed most of my senior year. And then that summer leading into going to my first pro camp, I still wasn't shooting the puck very good, and I was having troubles in finding the right type of brace to put on there because I had to have it protected. And so I went through probably a dozen different um, arm braces that I could put on. And I finally get to Pittsburgh's camp, and they made one that was pretty simple, but it was effective, and that really helped because the one I had from the U was just too bulky and it got in the way, and I couldn't handle the puck. But I think when got to the pro game, I think there's some adjustments to it, but I thought the game maybe slowed down a little bit, because I didn't seem like there was guys running around as much that there was in college. Even though the game's probably faster, it just seems like it wasn't as much running around and chaotic, and it seemed like I don't know. I just started to get more confident, and I think it was easy, not easy, but it was the coaches were pretty clear with me, like, hey, this is where you're gonna make your mark if you want to be a player and play at the next level. This is what you need to do and focus on doing this, and it was pretty much black or white, and that was something that I connected with and was able to kind of develop that year and got me ready to go to Pittsburgh the next year.
So, what was that conversation like? What were some of the things? What was the role that you were going to fill? What did they tell you?
Well, it was kind of like, they never said you're going to be a fighter, but you're a big guy and you can skate. So you got to, be hard to play against. You're going to be, finishing your checks, make plays on the wall, get the pucks out of the zone, get them in the zone, get a forecheck going. And we have some high end talent, guys like Lemieux and Yager and Francis, and you're not going to take their spot. So if you want to be somebody that can make this team, you're going to have to be someone on the third to fourth line that can grind and give some things that those other guys aren't, don't necessarily have to do or don't want to do.
Yeah, it looked like that season was really good for you from a developmental standpoint because in your second season as a professional, it looks like you made the team out of camp. Can you remember what it felt like when you finally became an everyday player in the NHL?
Well, I remember when they told me the athletic trainer, his name is Sevi, and he came into the training room and said, hey, what number do you want? And I said, well, how about the one I've been wearing? He said, yep, okay, it's yours. And then later that day, the coach had said, hey, you can get a place. And I was like, hey, this is for real. This is awesome. I kind of couldn't help from smile and kind of knew that it was going to be there for a while. And there never was somebody that could assume I was going to just, be here on a big term contract or something. I was always going to have to prove myself and always going to have to earn my time and earn my minutes. But it definitely felt good when they said, go ahead, get a place. And what number do you want? And I was like, that's how they kind of didn't tell me that I made it. They just said, you're not going anywhere. So I figured I made it.
Yeah, practices tomorrow. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Congrats. I'm sure that was awesome. So you mentioned their names, but you had the opportunity to play with two of the greatest players that ever played the game, and Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. I remember the first time I played against them, just scared, probably -5. Just brilliant players. What were some of the characteristics, habits, or processes that you learned from the two of them, just being around them, practicing, and seeing how they operate?
Yeah, that's a great, interesting topic. I remember watching those guys in practice and just being like, "Oh man, are they good?" And just realizing how I would focus and see what they were doing, and and I would try to imitate or replicate some of the stuff they would do. I remember Mario used to be able to. One time we were at the practice rink there in Pittsburgh, and he steps on the ice, and he was always like everything he did was super smooth and never seemed like he was in a hurry. He kept on the ice, and there was a puck laying there, and he just scooped up the puck on his blade without even trying, and then he flips it on its edge, and then he would flip it in the air, and he'd catch it, and then he'd like throw it at the net, and he didn't even think about what he was doing. He just did it, and it made it look so nonchalant that I went over and tried doing it. Probably chopped the puck into 3 or 4 pieces, but just things I'd noticed about them, like their confidence level was always something that I never saw them, with shaken confidence. They were always believing, like if they, maybe they had an empty net and they missed one, which they didn't do a lot, but if they did, it was no big deal. I'm going to get the next one. I'm going to score the next shift. They just had that mentality, that mindset that, well, you might stop me on this one, but I'm going to score one later on. Or like I remember Mario one game, he had 5 goals and 2 assists against the St. Louis Blues, and that was the day his son was born premature. His son Austin was born a couple months early, and he had an unreal game. He had 5 goals, and I think he hit 2 pipes, and he was just buzzing around. But I remember thinking, like, he had 5 goals that game. He wanted to get 6. Most guys to get 1 or 2, and they're like, "Hey, I'm feeling pretty good," you know. And those guys, if they scored, 4 or 5 points, they wanted to get 5 or 6 points, so they're never satisfied. And it just seemed like that's the one thing I remember about both of them was just how they just wanted more.
A quick word from our sponsor, Sniper's Edge Hockey.
Sniper's Edge Hockey is your one-stop shop for your at-home hockey training needs on and off the ice. Find the perfect start to your at-home training area with slick tiles, synthetic ice, or a rink liner. Or upgrade your home setup with one of our top-quality training tools to help you work on soft hands, all of your dekes and dangles, perfect your one-timer, and improve the power and accuracy of your shot. Find it all online and in stock for immediate shipping at snipersedgehockey.com.
Did you ever get to like sit next to one of them on the plane or go out to dinner where it was this two of you and you got to just dive into how they grew up?
Yeah, well, I remember I told this story with Mario. We used to play some cards in the back. It was me and Ron Francis, Chris Tamer, and Ken Reggett. We had a little four-seat deal where we would play cards, and the money wasn't very high. It wasn't one of those stories where you hear guys are putting in big pots. We didn't even play for money. We just played. But I told Mario a story when he was maybe 2 or 3 years in the league, and one of my best buds from high school, his dad ran the penalty clock or the scoreboard clock at the old Met Center. And so he would always get tickets to games, and I told him, I said, "Hey, I'm a big Lemieux fan. Can I go to the game when Pittsburgh's in town?" He says, "Okay, sure." So he gets his tickets, and his dad would always get to the game real early for a 7 o'clock game. We'd get there at like 5:30, and we're hanging out and down by the benches and things. And he was going to bring us to meet Lemieux after the game. He was going to bring us in the locker room. So I was all fired up, and I got my little piece of paper and note card. He's going to sign it. So we get in the locker room, and he's on the massage table, and my buddy Danny Lee's dad, Gordy, had passed a couple years back, but he brought us into the room, and he says, "Hey, Mario, this is my son's friend. He wants to meet you. His name's Joe." And he says, "Hi." And, again, French-Canadian guy. His English was not the best, but it was good. And so he signs the autograph. We chit-chat for 10 seconds, and I'm all fired up, and I'm leaving the locker room. We're in the hallway. I didn't look at the card until I got into the car, and it says "to Jill," like Jill Malash, Gilles. He thought I said, "What's your name?" And he thought I said Jill instead of Joe. So I told him that story. We were on a bus one time. I said, I met you when I was like in 7th grade, and he gave me an autograph. Gilles.
That's awesome. That had been a lot of fun playing with that team. Did you guys make any long runs in the playoffs there?
My rookie year, we should have went to the Stanley Cup. We lost to the Florida Panthers. That was the year they had the rat trick. They had just a veteran, like a lot of gritty type players. And I just remember we lost in Game 7 at home to go to the Stanley Cup. And that's probably been my biggest regret as a pro, was losing that home game to the Stanley Cup. We would have played Colorado in the Stanley Cup. And I think most NHL fans were hoping for Pittsburgh, Colorado that year because they had Forsberg and their team was stacked, Joe Dziedzic, et cetera. And our team was really good, but Tampa or Florida just had our number. And, it was one of those that we probably were the better team, but they got it done. And Van Beesbrook was their goalie, and he was really good and took it to 7 game, and we lost 3-1 with an empty netter.
It is the hardest championship to win, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, man. You win it when guys win it, and you see them have that when they ask them, how's it feel? They're just like, oh, I can't even say it because they're just like, man, I'm so relieved to finally get there, but I was close.
I remember seeing an interview with Luc Robitaille, and they asked him, what's the hardest thing about winning a Stanley Cup? He says, you just don't know how hard it is to win a Stanley Cup until you win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. It's so true. Simple, but so true.
Yeah. So what happened? Walk us through how you ended up after 2 years with the Phoenix Coyotes. And what happened in that last season for you? Because you had a pretty good year. You spent some time in the minors.
Yep.
But that was it for you. What happened?
Well, I think one of the things that happened was after spending a couple of years with Pittsburgh, they got rid of their coach. Eddie Johnson was the coach, and they fired him with about a month to go in the season. And Craig Patrick named himself the head coach. He was a general manager, and he named himself the head coach. And then he, the next year, I hired Kevin Constantine. And my agent at the time was Brian Lawton. And, maybe hindsight's 2020, but he did not like the offer that they had given me. And so I ended up missing like 2 days of training camp because he thought it should have been giving me more money. And looking back, I just wish I would have got in there and said, I'll take less money. I just want to get in there and, the new coaching staff and whatever. So I went in there and had a good camp, but then the day of the first game, I got called into Constantine's office, and he said, hey, look, we think you had a good camp, but we're bringing in some new guys that played for me previously, and we're going to send you down to the minors. Good luck. And so I went from thinking I was going to play that game, the first game that night, being sent to the minors, and they had picked up if you remember the Ferraro brothers, Chris and Peter Ferraro. Yeah, so those guys came in, and they had to make room, and so I was the odd man out. I got sent down. And then I get to Cleveland, and it took me a while to kind of get adjusted to everything. The speed of the game is a little bit slower. You're not playing with as good of players, and it seemed like I just was out of sorts for a bit. And I think maybe it was just mentally, too. You feel like, oh, man, I thought I was going to be with this team, and now here I am, and I have to reboot and kind of get it back together and play. Otherwise, you're going to stay there. And started at one side note of that, I ended up playing on the line with Marty St. Louis that year. And that was his rookie year. Marty came in from Vermont and didn't sign an NHL deal. Cleveland signed him, and ended up being – he was my winger with a kid named Perron. Can't remember his first name. Anyway, the two French-Canadian guys that came out of Vermont, really good players. And we had some good games and played together for a few months. And then at the end of that season, St. Louis got signed by Calgary. And then didn't really get a shot with Calgary, but then he signed with Tampa Bay, and then ever since he was in the NHL.
Crazy how opportunities are so important, along the process, how they can be given to you quick and be taken away even quicker.
Right. So then I finally started playing well, and then, as luck would have it, I had hurt my knee on a Sunday afternoon game in Cleveland. The guy kind of fell into my knee, and I tore some ligaments. And as luck would have it, that's when my trainer told me, "You're not going to believe this." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Well, Pittsburgh just called and was looking to call you up. But you're going to have surgery tomorrow, and you're going to be out for at least a month and a half." And but that's sometimes how the game works, and you just gotta roll with the bounces and see how sometimes they work. And in that time, it didn't work in my favor. And then I tried to rehab and come back, but the opportunity wasn't there. And then I signed with Phoenix the next year, and spent a few games with them. But I spent that season in Springfield in the AHL.
So let's talk about how your career ended, because I read that it was from an eye injury and you needed to have surgery on. And if you would have continued to play, you would have been risking further vision damage.
Yeah, it was kind of another fluky type of deal. I was in Springfield playing with the Springfield Falcons. We were in Syracuse playing, and it was a physical game, and there was a couple fights going on, and I ended up getting in a fight. And the guy didn't mean to do it, but when we squared off, he went to grab on. His thumb went right in my eye. And I thought he had landed a left, and just I didn't see it coming. And he, smoked me right in the eye. And I was like, man, that hurt. I couldn't see. So I was just kind of like holding on and waiting for that, the fight to end. And the ref came in, and he looked at my eye and said, "You got to go. You got to get off the ice." And I'm like, okay, something's wrong here. I couldn't see it. That's a scary feeling when you open up your eye, you're moving your hand, you can't see it. And so I ended up going to the hospital, and they did some tests, and they kept me overnight. And luckily they said that, hey, you should be all right. You're going to have to rest for a couple of weeks and just, but you might have avoided some serious eye damage. And I said, okay, well, I remember missing a couple of weeks. I started to come back and work out and train and started to play. And it wasn't until after that season in the summer, I was playing tennis with a buddy of mine, and the ball came over the net, and I went to go hit the ball, and I'd missed the ball. And I'm like thinking, wow, what's going on? I usually miss the ball. Well, then we started playing some more, and the ball comes back, and I go to hit it, and I miss the ball again. And I'm like, what's going on? And I had no idea that my retina had collapsed. So basically, my left eye was compensating for my right eye, and since the retina collapsed, the vision in my right eye was basically cut in half, and so that's why I would lose the ball and I couldn't see it. So I went in, I see an eye doctor, and he right away sends me to an eye specialist, and then he looks at it and says, "We're gonna have surgery tomorrow morning." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you got a collapsed retina," and I'm like, "That doesn't sound good." He says, "Nope, we got to have surgery tomorrow morning." So they went in there and they basically reattached the retina by putting a belt that goes around your eye, and then they tighten the belt to make it look. If your eye was like a basketball, they put the belt around it and they squeeze it, and now it's more like a football. And that pressure helps keep the retina to the back of the eye. And so after that healed, it took a couple months for it to heal. The doctors that I went and saw were like, "Hey, you really shouldn't keep playing hockey because this belt could fall off just by walking around, and if you're getting hit and checked into the boards or getting in fights, that's too dangerous and too risky, and you could lose your eyesight." So that's when my career ended, and then I kind of went through a little bit of not a depressed state, but just kind of a lost feeling of I didn't have any purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of felt like I obviously wanted to keep playing somewhere. There were some expansion teams that were opening up, and I thought there was going to be some more opportunity to keep playing, but unfortunately that didn't work out, and I moved on to my next chapter.
So that transition from player to non-player, the NHLPA has programs out there that I think it's called the Life After Hockey program.
Yep.
To help players in that transition. Did you take advantage of any of their program offerings?
I really didn't. I probably should have, especially because I graduated with the communications degree in broadcasting, and we would have thought I would have done something like that. But I didn't really know. I ran into Diane Ness, and she was running her power skating programs, and she asked me to come around and help out. And I was like, okay, I'll help out, and one thing led to another, and then I just started to do my own stuff, and then that's kind of how my JD hockey program started, and then that led to training and doing camps and 3-on-3 leagues and lessons, and then I started coaching with actually Scotty Bell was coaching in the high school elite league, and he called myself and Chris McAlpine to be assistant coaches. So we got in with him, coaching in that fall league, which was a lot of fun, working with some of the top high school players in the state. Well, then Scotty left to take a job at Hamlin, and then me and Chris ended up taking our own teams. And Chris is still doing it, 15 years later. But I did it for a good 5-6 years, and that was kind of my start of coaching, and which led into other high schools.
So did you coach any youth hockey teams coming up before you took the high school job, in addition to the high school elite league?
Yeah, the high school elite league was kind of like, my test run for coaching, and I kind of liked it. I felt like I was giving back. I was staying in the game and helping kids, and could mentor some kids and give them some advice, and that led into another coaching opportunity. So my first actual high school coaching job was at St. Paul Academy. Yeah, and I did that for a couple of years, and then left there and became the coach at Minneapolis. And I've been there now for 10 years. But it wasn't until my kids came up then that I started coaching youth hockey, and I coached the Roseville Squirts the last 2 years.
Oh, right. Like this last 2 years you've been coaching Squirts?
Yeah, so I coach my high school team, and I coach. So a typical day, Peter, is going to high school practice from like 4 to 5:30, and then I buzz over to Roseville and coach the Squirts from like 6:15 to 7:15.
You're in the trenches, but you've gained a knowledge for coaching that most of us that start when our kids start playing, we don't have any experience. Because even though we played at the level we played at, coaching, that's a different animal, and it took me a number of years to get a handle on it. But the only way that happened was that I was mentored by some really good coaches that weren't going to go anywhere beyond mites, but they showed me the way. How about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a big deal, because there's a lot of former players that maybe have a lot of hockey knowledge, but working with kids that maybe can't catch a pass or can't cross over, they can't do the drills that you might want to do, because you're like, well, let's do this drill. Well, wait a minute, these kids can't even skate backwards. Let's work on the simple things and build them up from there. So building the fundamentals, right? That's where I've seen a lot of good coaches that maybe don't have a lot of hockey experience, but they know how to work with kids, and they know how to push the buttons to keep it fun and keep them energized and keep them smiling.
So I heard that you're taking a youth team over to Sweden in August?
Yeah, I've run this AAA program. I used to do a AAA program, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I kind of got out of it when I started doing more high school coaching. But then my kids come up, and they want dad to coach their AAA team. So I started this team called the Dusty Tukes. And if you're Canadian, you'd say Dusty Tucks, right? But, so basically, it was the kind of a jab at some of these AAA teams that everybody wants to be the, all-star elite mega pro players. And we're kind of taking the approach of the Bad News Bears. We're Dusty Tukes. And so I started doing this AAA thing. We've got 3 or 4 different teams, and we're going to bring a team over to Sweden in August. Do you remember Leon Bristad, who played at the U? Yeah, he played with Ren. And so his dad is Johan Sundberg, and he runs Top Hockey over in Sweden. And so me and him started up a relationship, and he started sending me some Swedish guys, and I went over and did a couple of camps with him in Stockholm. And we've been talking about me bringing some players over to him. And so this year, finally, we would have done it a couple of years ago, but COVID kind of threw a curve in that. So this fall or this August, we're going to send about 18, 20 players over, and we're going to do some training. We're going to play some Swedish teams and do some sightseeing and check out Stockholm. So we're looking forward to that. It should be a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I mean, can you imagine a year after you retired from playing that you would get as much satisfaction coaching?
No way. That was the thing. I remember I did a couple of job interviews after I was done playing that summer, and one of the interviewers asked me, well, what are you passionate about? Or what do you, I said, well, I've been doing hockey for the last 5 years, and I've been an athlete for the last 20 some years, and I don't know. Whatever I do, it's got to be something to do with sports. I didn't really know where it was going to lead me, but after doing it now for 20 years, coaching different guys and training different players at different levels, as you know, because you're in that same type of work, that it's a connection, relationships that you get, the connection, and you're helping somebody out, and then they're using what you give them to their advantage, or they're helping to advance their goals. And I think there's a certain sense of pride or a sense of purpose that you get when you're helping other kids, even if it's a B2 player that's going up to the B level. It's not always the guys that are going to be the top guys. Sometimes you're helping kids that are maybe a B2 C player, and you're trying to get to the B1 level, and you help that kid get there. That's a pretty good feeling of knowing that you helped them and you gave them some confidence, and maybe that opened some doors for them to do things. And I think that's what coaching is all about, is just passing the things that you've experienced on to them. And if they can get a little bit of advantage or a little bit of help, then I think it's a win-win.
So talk a little more about JD Hockey. And we know that you got your hands in the Dusty Tukes, the AAA program, so I'm sure you're doing some on-ice stuff with them, but you also do some small group and private training. Just touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, so JD Hockey was basically started out as camps, and it led to do some lessons, private lessons and small group training. And then I started some 3-on-3 leagues. I run these 3-on-3 leagues out of Parade in the little studio rink. It's been had a lot of good players come through over the years. And it's just something that kind of grew and grew. And now I've got a warehouse. I call it the Dusty Tukes Hockey Center in New Brighton, and it's got synthetic ice. It's got boards and netting with real nets, and you can skate around and shoot, stick handle. And you've got a turf area where you can do some off-ice training. You can do some agility. I brought Jack Blatherwick, a guy that we both know and respect and have had as coach, kind of a legend, right, in Minnesota hockey. And brought Jack over there, and he was, "Oh, this is great. I wish we had something like this years ago." And so it was kind of neat to have Jack give me the blessing on that place. And he just said it was really cool to see me giving back and helping kids and train kids. So you have to come over and check it out sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to see what you have there. So a couple more questions, then we're going to let you go. And I, again, really appreciate you taking the time. The messaging, the stories are just awesome. A lot of people come intersecting in and out of our life. What's the best advice you've ever were given, and who was it by?
I have to be something that my dad had probably told me. My dad was a big influence on me, and he passed a few years back, but he's still with me every day, and he's somebody I think about a lot. But I don't know if there was an exact quote that he gave me, but he just, the way he did things and the way he led by example and showed me the way, and always said, hey, you got to believe in yourself, and you've got to, earn your keep, and you've got to, make sure you do your name proud, right? And he was proud of being Dziedzic, and he wanted to make sure that I did my best to live up to the name and make it something he could be proud of. And that's something I think I want to pass on to my kids. But it's funny. Some of your kids have come and done some of my training, and I give these guys T-shirts. So every year I've got a new saying on the back of my T-shirts I put on there. And this year it was, "The will must be greater than the skill." And I think that's a good quote for kids to think about, is that you've got to want it, and you've got to work for it, and you got to be willing to do it. I still quote all the time. One of the quotes I stole was from the Pittsburgh Steelers coach, whose name I can't think of right now. But he always talks about, it's not what you're capable of, it's what you're willing to do. And so those are two quotes that I kind of like to use and say it to the kids. But so when it comes to saying and quotes, I think I always try to put something on my T-shirts that I give to the kids. So every year, and somehow it seems like the word "will" comes into the back of the shirt somehow. So I'm a big will guy when it comes to wanting it and willing to do it.
Yeah, and matching the action with that desire or want, at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
If you want it bad, you got to match that action with that. So you get in front of a lot of players, boys, girls, men, women, from all over the place. I know you were down in Texas a couple weeks ago working with a group. What's the biggest deficiency you're seeing in your interactions? Is it skating? Is it puck skills? Is it hockey IQ? What are some areas that you think that summer's a great time to make some small improvements? What should players be focusing on?
Well, I think the biggest improvement I've seen since I started 20 years ago was that the skill of the players seems to get better and better at a younger age. Like, there's kids now that are doing Michigan moves, picking the puck up and stuffing it from behind the net. Me and you weren't doing that when we were growing up. At least I wasn't. But I think I see more and more kids have some of the puck skills. I see, a lot of kids that can fly and skate. Maybe the one thing I'd say sometimes is missing is that hockey IQ or that hockey sense or that anticipation for what's about to happen. I think sometimes that's a big need for kids. And I think that taps into the mental part. Kids, are they students of the game? They might have the physical skills, but I think sometimes that's what's between the ears that separates players. You played with guys like super skilled guys that maybe didn't look as physical as you might look at it. Well, that guy played in the NHL, or even a guy like Jared Spurgeon, who's not the biggest guy. He's not the fastest guy, but he's pretty skilled and pretty smart out there. He always makes the right play and never gets exposed to get a big hit, right? He just sees everything coming. And I think that's a big thing that maybe gets sometimes forgotten about, is just the hockey IQ and figuring out what to do and when to do it versus just go around that cone and skate and shoot.
Yeah, the number one skill, that you spend the most time on playing hockey is skating. So you're always going to have the anomalies that, those few players that are just exceptional. But then there's a big grouping that are very similar. And the ones that separate in that group are the ones that can, handle the puck and where their eyes up are, they're up more than they're down. And if you don't have the puck skills, hockey IQ is irrelevant because you're not seeing the ice.
That's right.
So it is a progression and it takes time. But all good things. So I just wanted to thank you again. Last thing, give us where people can find you to learn more about what you offer people.
Sure.
Here in the Twin Cities area, and I know that you travel. So if people are looking to get you to come out there to run a camp or a clinic, that is an option. So how can they find you?
Yeah, probably easiest is just my website is jdhockey.com, and you can email me at joe@jdhockey.com. And whether it's lessons or coming up to my warehouse to do some training, or whether it's a 3-on-3 league or camp, there's probably an option for you to fit your schedule. So that's probably the best way.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on a great career, one that was cut short, unfortunately, but you definitely, picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, pulled out the will card. And today, I would say that your dad's looking down proudly on you, on what you also accomplished, but more importantly, how you're giving back to people to help them have the best experience they can playing the game of hockey. So thank you, Joe.
That's awesome. I appreciate it, Lance. And before I let you go, I just want to give you some kudos too. I've done some training with both your boys, Rem and Rhett, and super genuine kids, no ego, easy to work with, easy to see that they're passionate about the game, and just more than being good hockey players, they're just really good kids. So great job raising those two.
I'll make sure his mother gets that message. Thank you. That's very kind of you. So if there's anything you need from me in the short term to help with what you got going on, please don't hesitate to ask. But I'm always pushing you as an option for extra master skill training to players I get in front of. So have a great summer. I know this is summer's a big time for us. Thanks for all you do, Joe, and have a great summer.
All right. Thanks, Lance.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Hockey Journey podcast. I can't thank you enough for stopping by and listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing Joe Dziedzic's hockey journey, and if you think there's someone in your circle of family and friends that might like the episode as well, please share it with just one person. It will really help me in growing this hockey community. Again, I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, or submit a review. I hope to see you back here soon, and do me a favor, make someone close to you smile today. All the best, my friends.